Well, friends, we have a baby. It's true. Nicole's new little baby boy, my nephew, has been born this week. It's been an exciting week for sure. It didn't go quite according to plan, but new baby boy and mom and dad are all doing well, as is big sister. Anders Joseph is the new baby's name. He made his debut on, let's see, I am filming this on Thursday, November 6th. He made his debut yesterday in the wee hours of Wednesday, November 5. We were in charge of watching all of Big Sister, so we had to, her water broke Tuesday night, which would have been the 4th, so we had to make a trip to go pick her up. She stayed overnight at our house Wednesday night, and then we got to hang out with her all day yesterday. And she is just a delight. Babies are fun, babies are good, but I love a toddler. There's just nothing like all of their questions, getting to hear their funny little thoughts, their spontaneity, their laughter. I really enjoyed getting to spend so much time with her. I enjoyed my little sleepover friend overnight. That was fun. She was super entertaining, very chatty at bedtime, and I was here for it. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, so we got to hang out. We got to take her to the hospital then yesterday to meet her new baby brother. And she definitely loves her new her new little brother. It was really cute getting to see them together and all of the questions that she had about everything you can imagine. His little wristband, his diaper, his little feet, his fingers, anything she noticed about him. She had all the questions, and it was so cute. It was really neat to see her get to spend time with him. So his name again, Anders Joseph. The middle name is named after Nicole's husband, and just adorable. He was 6 pounds, 13 ounces, so just a small little baby. Very compact. That's how Elodie always describes babies. And now Elodie is my baby fan. She was over all day today. She actually stayed overnight with them at the hospital. So she stayed overnight and was there all day today. And she just loves helping with babies. She did it from the time Olive was born too. She would go and help my sister out and hang out with baby, and she just loves it. So little compact Anders has made his debut. So be sure to wish Nicole well in the comments. She commented just this week that she's not going to be able to see the live version of the videos anymore. Usually she is just sitting in the background of my videos, stuffing patterns or answering emails or whatever it might be. So she gets the live version of the videos every week, and she said she's not going to get those anymore. So wish her well. Hopefully she gets a chance to, well, she's probably not. She's going to be busy, but I will tell her if we have some nice comments coming in, I'll be sure and let her know. So we are actually filming on a Thursday night because, as you can tell, my week got away from me. It's Thursday night. I am quickly trying to, well, not quickly. We're going to spend some chatty time here tonight, but I am filming this before I need to go up and make supper. We're going to have ham and cheese melts, I think is what my plan is. Ham and cheese melts and some kind of vegetable. So after I'm done filming here, I get to go handle supper. It feels a little different this week. I know my schedule's going to take a little bit of time to get used to. I was just thinking, you're noticing maybe a new backdrop behind me, and I was just thinking about how much I'm going to miss having Nicole not do my backdrops, because that is something that's time consuming, and she just always does a fantastic job. So I'm really going to miss her not having, for other reasons too. And it's not like she's far. We live about 20 minutes apart, so she doesn't live far, and I'm sure we'll be back and forth, but it's just not the same as having her here 3 mornings a week, every week. So it's going to feel a little different. So yeah, let's talk about this backdrop. This is the Barnstar backdrop. These are Barnstars 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. So the first 4 Barnstars, those are all 40-inch Barnstar patterns. And I thought, since our $5 pattern of the month for this month is Barnstar 8, it might be fun just to do a Barnstar backdrop. So if you're purchasing the $5 Barnstar, you could also purchase a bundle of these first 4. Actually, there are now 3 bundles of Barnstar patterns. So 1 through 4, and then we have 5 through 8, and then 9 through 12. So there are actually 3 different Barnstar bundles now, but this will be in the backdrop here for a little bit. Hopefully not too long. I'm hoping that I can stay on top of changing out the backdrops as quickly as Nicole always did for us, but we will see what happens. So for our video today, I've got a little bit of everything planned. I'm going to be answering some viewer questions that came in within the last few weeks. I have a redo of Beautifully Charming, and we're going to do a tutorial on this. This is a free quilt pattern, so I'm going to be sharing a block tutorial and then a redo of the quilt digitally in the garden fabrics, since those are hitting quilt shops. And we're going to start here with a viewer quilt share. Now this is a long and newsy email, and I enjoyed reading down through it, and sometimes, you know, things move quick. Sometimes it's nice just to take a little bit of time and read down through a newsy email. So that's what we're going to do. You'll see the photos as always, but just one viewer quilt share for today. Hi, Nicole and Corey. I absolutely love your Saturday videos, especially when Tigsy makes an appearance, and I've really enjoyed all of the quilt shares. I have been thinking about contributing, but I get super long-winded. Then I cut a bunch of words out and sound awkward, so I kept procrastinating. All that to say, I'm going to go long-winded on this email, knowing that you can edit as needed for clarity if you choose to use any of my pictures. I have mentioned in a comment before that you, Corey, are the reason I quilt. I was doing an embroidery project a handful of years ago, and I needed to do some binding. I found your binding tutorial, and it worked. I loved your cheerful spirit and your manner of speaking. I am also an Ohio girl, so that may be part of the reason, haha. Not long after I started following you, I got your Oh Happy Day book and a fat quarter bundle of Buttercup and Slate so I could do the Oh Happy Day mystery quilt along. I decided to make 2 of each block with the intent of giving 1 quilt to my daughter for Christmas and making a matching quilt for myself. I made it through all of the blocks, but realized that I wouldn't have her quilt ready for Christmas if I didn't focus only on it. So my quilt went into a plastic bin with a plan to finish it after the new year. I compared each set of blocks and selected the best ones for Terry's quilt. Trust me, some of those blocks were so wonky. My first time piecing, and yes, I learned a lot. I substituted a turtle block from the book instead of the house block for her quilt, backed it with Shannon Cuddle with her favorite flowers, and quilted it on my brother embroidery machine. Tedious. She loved it, and I was so excited to have finished my first ever quilt. I am attaching pictures of her quilt as well as the current state of my quilt. Spoiler alert, I took it out of the plastic bin the other day. I think I have been procrastinating partly because I know those quilt blocks will need extra frames added so I can then cut them to the right size and finish the quilt. This will be my next project. In the meantime, I finished a handful of other quilts, and I want to be sure and tell you that your way of doing a quilt along, your videos and instructions, literally just everything you do as a professional in the quilting industry is excellent. I did one sew along where I felt like the videos were a waste of time, one where there were no videos or anything at all, and well, I really like the way you do things, so thank you for that. I will continue to look forward to your Saturday videos, and if I hear any of this long email and or see any of the attached pictures, I will be excited. Keep up the great work. Lisa G, an Ohio girl living the Florida Panhandle life. So as you can see, that was a very nice email to read through. It was just so kind and thoughtful, and I appreciate you, Lisa, taking the time to send such a nice email. And of course, I'm going to share the whole thing in its entirety and all of the pictures that you sent. I loved the labels that you put on your quilt. That I've said it here before, I am the worst quilt labeler, and so when I see people who label their quilts and do such a beautiful job, I'm always a little bit jealous. I should just do it myself, and I say that, but I know myself, and I probably will not become an expert quilt labeler anytime soon. I wish. I should just do it. I know it's important to label those quilts. I get it. I just know I'm bad at it. and that's my own choice to be bad at it, because I could certainly take that step. All right, we're gonna move on from lovely emails. If you want to send in any photos or quilt shares of your projects, feel free to do so. I have the email in the description box below, and I do love reading your emails, and I love seeing the things that you make using my fabrics and patterns. Let's just go into this beautifully charming project here. I had this quilt on my mind this week, and I decided we're just gonna see what this looks like in the garden fabrics. I started playing around with it in those fabrics and ended up trying out a few different things. So I'm gonna show you what I did. If you're unfamiliar with the Beautifully Charming quilt, it is a free quilt pattern that I released with my Beautiful Day line of fabric, which has been a couple years. But this is one of the original quilts. There are two of them. This is the red version, and then there is also a gray version. But just so you can see what it looks like, it is a charm pack friendly quilt. And it's nice to have a free charm pack quilt that shows off your charm squares nicely, and you end up with a nice sized quilt. So let us look at this in the garden fabrics. I'll have a link to the PDF pattern in the description box below as well. So if you want to snag that pattern, if you hadn't seen that before, you'll be able to do so. But let me show you some fun. Okay, we'll hold off on that for just a minute. This is what the pattern is going to look like when you go to download and print it off. It's just a 2-page pattern. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to see when I share the block tutorial, pretty straightforward to make. The pattern just sort of creates itself once you add the sashing and the borders. It really lets there's a lot of contrast, so you get to see how those blocks shape up. But, okay, what I really want to show you is this is what it could look like using in the garden fabrics. You can see it's sunshiny and happy. I went with the X print fabric in the coral for the sashing and first border, and then the dark gray floral for the outer border. I will put these images over on the Coriander Quilts blog so that you can see them better than what you can see here with just my little printouts. So if you wanted to see these in more detail, be sure to check that out. But this is what it would look like using the same darks and lights as in the original quilt. And then I thought, well, what happens if we switch around the darks and the lights? And this is what that looks like. I thought that was fun to see. And then when I was looking at that, I wondered, well, hey, what happens if we swap out this coral fabric and do a print back behind? So we have one print for the square in the forefront, and then back behind we have a different print. So that's what that would look like. And that is scrappy and happy and fun. Now, you won't find fabric requirements for making these changes. You could pretty easily figure it out on your own, but I did want to mention that. I didn't take the time to do any math. I just wanted to see what it looked like. So there are the 3 different versions, and I thought it was fun to see each of the different options. So the original here in the center, just swapping lights and darks for the block frames and then the sashing. And then going just pretty scrappy right here for this version. With that being said, we are going to move right into a block tutorial for this block because I want you to see just how easy it is to make this. Sometimes when we see a pattern, we think, oh, that looks tricky. I don't know if I can do that. But oftentimes when we break down the block just a little bit and you get a look at how things come together, it's in general not as tricky as you might be thinking. So I have cut the pieces that I need just for one block. I could easily see what I needed based on my little diagram right here. So I just cut everything I needed for one block, which are 1A piece, that's your 5-inch charm square. And then you have B and C, which in this diagram would be the outer corners and then these little C areas right here. So the dark areas in the block. And then H and G, which are the light areas in this block. Now I used, the prints that I've used are all in the garden. C and B are the coral tiny peel print, which is just a small scale little X scattered across the fabric. I love it for backgrounds. It's going to work really pretty in this block. G and H are that same print on the white background. So they have multicolored X's spread throughout the fabric. Love it for a background. The first thing that you're going to see that we need to do here In step number 1 is we are creating half square triangles, and we are making those with B and G. I have already marked my diagonal lines. I did it on G. I did it on B. I did it on B. Marked my sewing lines on the back of my B squares, and I'm going to use those with G to make half square triangles. You're going to see in your pattern as you read down through, this is telling you how to make one block. So I'm just going to follow my instructions here to make one block. These are going to be sewn and then trimmed to 2 1/4 inches square. And you can see here in the illustration that we are pressing these to the dark fabric. Now, of course, when you go and print out your pattern, you're going to be able to see everything really nicely. So if you are trying to follow along, print out your pattern first, and then you can follow right along. I'm going to go ahead and sew these half square triangles and get them trimmed down to size. I have 2 half square triangles trimmed and ready to go. Those are trimmed to 2 1/4. I saved 2 to trim on camera so that you could see. 2 1/4 is a little bit of an unusual measurement. We don't encounter trimming half square triangles down to those 1/4 inch measurements as often as we do full or 1/2 inch measurements. So it doesn't lend itself as well to using some different rulers that we might be accustomed to. So for that reason, I thought I would just show you how I approach trimming these up. I'm sure many of you always use a square ruler when you're trimming, and some of you probably don't. So this information could be helpful to some of you. What I'm looking for here is just a square ruler that has the diagonal, at least one diagonal marked right there. And this one does the trick. This is a Quilter Select ruler. This is what I am going to trim with. And I am going to line that diagonal with the diagonal of my half square triangle. And I want to make sure that I have a little bit of fabric, or at least no shortage of fabric, around the perimeter. So this is my 2 1/4 inch marking right here on my little ruler. And then over here, you can kind of see those dashed lines there, and then I still have a little space around the perimeter. So I'm going to trim these first 2 sides right here, and then pivot this little guy around and do the same thing. So this time I'll make sure my diagonal is lined up with the diagonal on my half square triangle, and then I am lining up the 2 1/4 measurement on these 2 trimmed sides, and then I just need to trim these other 2 sides. And there is my trimmed up half square triangle. We'll do that again. So here's the next little guy. Just gonna trim him up nicely. You can, of course, trim any size half square triangle using this method. It's handy to know that we can trim with just a standard ruler. We don't need a specialty ruler to trim our half square triangles. There is the second. So now I have 4 total, and we're ready to move on to the next step. Now, as you look at the pattern here, you're going to see in steps 2 through steps 4, we are making stitch and flip corners, and this is going to be made using our H rectangles and our C squares. Now pay attention to the measurement of your H rectangles. You're going to see they are indeed rectangular, but it would be somewhat easy to get this pivoted incorrectly. So pay attention to the measurement markings in your illustrations on your pattern. We are going to be making 2 different units using H and C. We're going to be making a right unit and a left unit. So one piece gets the stitch and flip corner sewn on the left side, the other on the right side. And it does matter. If you do this incorrectly, you're going to end up with incorrect orientation for the way your diagonals fall for your stitch and flip corners. So let's go ahead and start just as the pattern shows by placing our C square in the top left corner of H. And I have marked my stitching line on C, and we're just going to put that right up there in the top corner. And so we're going to be making 4 that are oriented like this. We're going to place our pieces right sides together, sew on that marked diagonal, press away from the center Double check and make sure that everything lines up after you have sewn that. Once you have checked that it is properly made, then you can trim out those bottom 2 layers, and that is going to leave you with a left stitch and flip unit. And then you'll make 4 like that, and then you're going to make 4 that are right stitch and flip units. And just like the name implies, we are sewing this to the top right side. So we'll make 4 where the corner is added like this. And then these get pressed open. Alternatively, you could opt to press all of your left units away from the center and then all of your right units toward the center. That would allow you to nest your seams. I think I am actually going to go about it that way for this block. The previous ones I made, I would have pressed open, and that allows you to eliminate that bulk where those seams come together. But I am a seam nester, so I love when I can nest my seams. So whichever is your preference, go ahead and press which way feels the best option for you. I will sew these up, and then I'm going to show you how that pressing looks on the back. And here are my stitch and flip corners. I did save one just to trim on camera, so you can see what I've done here. I wanted to talk about it just a little bit, but you know, I had explained how we would be sewing this, sewing on that marked diagonal, pressing out, making sure everything lines up, and then trimming out those bottom 2 layers. I wanted to chat about this just a little bit because you can see how handy it is to wait to trim until after you have pressed, because now we can see that this lines up really nicely with my rectangle. I don't have anything hanging out here that you can see on the back, and you can see here on the front that that top piece extends all the way to the perimeter of that corner. And that's going to be important to make sure that your stitch and flip corner is accurate. I hear this a lot, that people have difficulties with stitch and flip corners. There are always specialty rulers that you can use if you want to. I know a lot of you have favorites that you enjoy using. Not everybody has a specialty ruler that they have on hand that they've purchased, and this is a great way to make a stitch and flip corner and be able to double check that you are accurate before you've cut anything off. Once you cut these bottom 2 layers off, aside from measuring and realizing that things have gone awry when you were sewing, you really don't have a great way to check for accuracy. But if you wait until you've pressed, you can make sure that everything is lining up. So now I can trim out these bottom layers. I'm happy with how I've sewn, and I oftentimes am just using a scissors to trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance off of the back there. So this is what my units look like here. Everything is currently pressed away from the center, both the left and the right. Because of the way I make these, if I am pressing anything aside from away from the center, I need to repress. So if I would be pressing open, I would go over to my ironing board and I would press these all open at this point in time. So I mentioned that I wanted to press half of them in the opposite direction. So I'm just going to take these back over to my sewing machine. I'm going to press, I'll just press this, give this a flat press down so that it no longer is pressed away, and then I will repress that so that that seam is going towards the center. And we've got some pressed to the center stitch and flips. Now some of you are going to think that seems a little bit fussy to do stitch and flip corners that way. I've been doing it that way for years. I love not having to have anything special to do it. I love that I can check my accuracy before I trim anything away. And I'm in general pretty happy with my results. So that is where I've landed for right now. All right, now the next step that you are going to do is to sew these together. And now because we have alternating seams, these are going to nest really nicely for us. If you opted to press open, those are going to come together nicely as well without a lot of bulk in that intersection. I'm going to sew all of these together and make 4 pairs total. Well, I just had some visitors watching me at my ironing board just now. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something and I looked up and we had 2 deer just meandering through our backyard, watching me as I was ironing and sewing. I just love having Well, you know I love seeing Tigsy when he comes up to my windows, but now deer come up. There was a groundhog one time that scared Nicole so bad because he came right up. Her computer is also right in front of the windows here in our basement. They're ground level, so they can just walk right up, they can peer in, we can see what's happening. It's pretty entertaining. You can see the windows in my studio tour, but just imagine having critters walk up to you as you're sewing and ironing. It's the most entertaining thing. That groundhog was funny though, because he really scared Nicole. And I had to take a video of that because that was hilarious. But anyhow, 2 deer just moseying along. We're going to move back to our block construction here. These units are now finished. Here's what they look like on the back. And because of the way I pressed, they nest nicely. So I have 4 of those. When you are reading down through the pattern, you will find measurements throughout. So you can see here in step number 4 that these are going to measure 2 1/4 by 5. You're pressing to one side. So those are done. And now we are ready to sew the components together. So I'm going to grab A here, and what we're going to do, let me move that up. We are going to place these pairs. Oh my goodness, look how crooked that is. Wouldn't you have loved if I had just done the whole thing all completely crooked like that? I think that's better. Sometimes I'm too busy looking down, I don't look up to see exactly what you guys are seeing. All right, so we're going to place these pairs around the sides of the charm square. And then these half square triangles are going to go in each of the 4 corners. Now you can start to see that pattern emerge. Let me move this over here back into the shot. You can see how the white is going to frame everything out. The magic happens with these corner half square triangles when we add the sashing into this quilt. So I'm going to sew these rows together. Once I have them sewn together, I'll sew all of those together to complete this block. Our little block is now done. This is 8.5 inches. It will finish at 8 inches within the quilt. There's what the back looks like. And all in all, pretty simple to piece. And hopefully with those extra tips I gave you, it's even simpler than you might have imagined. So you can go grab your pattern. If you are looking for a charm pack quilt, this might be the one. If you do make up a cute little beautifully charming quilt, be sure and send me pictures. I would love to see it, especially if you make one using in the garden fabrics, because I think that could be super cute. All right, next up, just a few questions to answer that came in over the last couple weeks. We're gonna start with one from SDealBA6829. Corey, as always, I love to watch your videos and enthusiasm. Love, love chenille. I collect vintage ones. For one day, I'm going to make something with them. I love, love the chevron quilt you finished. Is that your pattern? Could you share, please? And are those vintage sheets? I collect them also. Love the idea of turning them into a beautiful quilt like that. Thanks for sharing. All right, so I don't know if you knew, but I also collect vintage sheets. However, this quilt is not made using vintage sheets. I imagine since I purchased these fabrics about 16 years ago, they are almost to the vintage fabric stage of their life. I don't know at what point in time things become vintage, but definitely not new fabrics. This is the quilt she's talking about. I've talked about it a few times because it was a recent finish. And a lot of these fabrics are Amy Butler fabrics and some solids. So no, not vintage sheets. As far as a pattern, if you Google free chevron quilt pattern, you're going to come up with a lot. Some of them are yardage based. You'll also find some that use pre-cuts. There's a lot available and in various sizes. So that's where I would suggest you start looking just with a quick Google search for a pattern. But really all this is half square triangles. So the whole entire quilt is half square triangles. So they finish at 4 inches. You can see right here, half square triangle, and then a half square triangle here, just rotated differently. Entirely half square triangles. So it would be, if you're familiar with quilt math at all, it is going to be somewhat simple to figure out. For if you are familiar, super familiar, it's going to be super simple to figure out. But if you don't do a lot of quilt math, you'll have to think about it a little bit. But for half square triangles, when you are making them, the math rule is whatever your finished size is. So I said these were 4 inches finished. That's the size they measure within the quilt. You add 1 inch to that measurement, and that's the size you cut your squares. Technically, you only need 7/8 inch added to your finished size, but adding 1 inch gives you just a little bit of wiggle room to trim down. If you want just a little bit more wiggle room, add 1 1/8 or 1 1/4 to the finished size of your measurement. So for this half square triangle that finishes at 4 inches, I added 5 inches and then trimmed those to 4.5 inches, which means they finish at 4 inches in the quilt. So this is the chevron quilt. And for those of you who don't want to do math, who aren't good at the quilt math, just Google chevron quilt pattern and you're going to find a lot of options. I did it just this afternoon before filming to make sure that was the case, because I thought for sure, and yes indeed, a lot of options available to you. As long as you can make half square triangles, you can make this quilt. Next up, question from Carol Sews. She says, when you send a quilt for long arming, how much extra width do you add to the border piece so that there is enough fabric to allow for the quilt to shrink up due to all the quilting and then the trimming? I need a 2-inch finished border, so I would normally cut it at 2.5 or 2 3/4 inches if I were going to machine quilt myself. But I think long arming is different. I've never had a quilt long armed before. I cut my border at whatever size the pattern says to cut it at. I don't add or subtract anything depending on how it's being quilted. So whatever the pattern calls for. For a 2-inch finished border, it would call for 2.5-inch width for those strips. So that's what I would be cutting it at. That's what I do. From Tracy Weiland. Hi Cori, I love the strawberry sampler quilt, and with socialites starting in January, I was wondering if you could tell me the size of the little blocks inside the strawberry. I think this quilt would be a great way to set the socialites blocks. I was planning on doing the 3-inch size. I always love the fabrics you design and the colors you use. Thanks so much. This is such a great idea, Tracy. This is the strawberry sampler pattern. This is a new pattern I just released within, maybe a month. It's pretty new. Those little blocks within the strawberries are 6-inch finished. So you could utilize this setting with the socialites sew along. You'd want to use the 6-inch option. Remember, we can do those blocks in 3, 6, or 9. The patterns are going to include all 3 different sizes, so you can use the size that works best for you. You probably, if you use the 6-inch size, let me double check. I think these are 12-inch finished blocks. Yes, 12-inch finished blocks. So you probably wouldn't want to make all of the socialites blocks if you were going to use this as your setting option. That would make a really big quilt. I don't recall offhand how many blocks there are, but there are quite a few. And there are only 20 needed for this setting. But a great idea. Love that idea. I hope you do that, but if you want 3-inch blocks, I don't know if you will. But for those of you who might be thinking about the 6-inch blocks, this would be a really fun setting. Lorinda King says, do you use the middle section of the strip? This came in on a video about jelly roll strips, and this is a great question. I have a jelly roll here that has been open and just sitting on a sewing cart in my sewing room here for a long time. This is an old Tula Pink fabric line. It's called Neptune. Actually, for those of you who are Tula Pink fans, this is a fabric line she designed when she was designing for Moda. So it's always kind of fun to see older fabric lines from a loved fabric designer. But I had this handy, and because it was already opened, I thought this would be a great one to chat about, so I just grabbed it. But we'll just show these prints here in case any of you are Tula Pink fans and think seeing these fabrics would be kind of fun. I don't know if I'll go down through all of them or not, but you're getting the idea. And probably if you're a Tula Pink fan, you already know what these fabrics look like. But again, this is Neptune. It's a Moda line, Tula Pink from Moda. And it's very oceanic, I guess you would say, which you would expect with a name like Neptune. one of these prints. Which one was it? Is it this one? Yeah, this one has the turtle. You know, she's really well known for her animals in her fabric lines. This one has a turtle in there. I don't remember what other animals are in this specific fabric line of hers, but it's blues, greens, this really pretty coral down here. Just a neat fabric line. Okay, so I think we're gonna stop there. But the question was about that, let me see how she worded it. Do you use the middle section of the strip? And in jelly roll strips, she's asking because sometimes it's this center fold right here. Sometimes this center fold, now this looks great and sometimes it's perfect, but sometimes it's a little bit skewed on the sides, the left and right of that center crease. And so if I am working with a jelly roll strip and it's easy for me to cut that center piece out, if I'm cutting rectangles or squares and maybe it comes up close to that seam and I don't have to really lose a lot of fabric by skipping a little chunk of my jelly roll strip, I will opt just to skip that little center crease and then keep going on the other side. But if it loses me a lot of fabric, I'm not going to do that. It's just if I'm cutting and it kind of falls nicely and I'm not going to run short of fabric, I will opt not to use that little center piece. So I don't know if any of you have ever had that same question. It's a good question. And like I said, I'll skip it if it works nicely to do so. Do you guys skip those? Let us know in the comments if you're a center fold skipper, because I imagine some of you skip that if you can. Sometimes it doesn't matter. That strip looked great. I had opened up another one in preparation for this video from this same jelly roll and it looked great. Sometimes they're really nice. And every now and then you get ones that just are a little bit wonky on the left and right of that very center fold. All right, next question. Does Jelly Twinkle have flying geese in it? This question is from Colleen F. I like when you let us know what blocks are. Love the new line and the flannel is so soft. So I pulled my Jelly Twinkle pattern and here it is. And since last year, 2024, I switched the way I label my patterns. So this is an example of how I label my patterns. Rather than using advanced, intermediate, beginner, or any of those labels on my quilt patterns, I tell you what skills are utilized. So then you can decide if it's a pattern for you. So for Jelly Twinkle, you need accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, rotary cutting, and flying geese units. So yes, it does include flying geese units. If a pattern includes half square triangles, or if it would include stitch and flip corners, small piecing, strip piecing, you know, some of those different techniques that we use when making quilts, it will be listed and it will say the quilting skills used as well as the block size that is within the quilt. So, and that changed in 2024, probably the beginning of 2024. So for the last, well, I would have written those patterns in 2023. So for the last about 2 years or so, that's how I've been writing my patterns. And you're going to see that reflected in quilt patterns released 2024 and forward. From Rhonda Barton, I think this is our last question for today. Yes, she says, good morning, Corey and Nicole. I love everything fall and I love your roadside harvest pattern. I've been looking for that special fabric line that has 5 different fabric patterns in different colors for the pumpkins. Do you have any suggestions for alternate fabric lines, as it is not proving fruitful to find the Cozy Up fabric line? Thank you for another great Saturday morning. Great question. I went on a little bit of a search this afternoon to see what current fall fabric lines caught my eye that I could recommend. And a lot of them I was finding had maybe 4 same fabric. This is the Roadside Harvest pattern, by the way. So you can see there are the same fabric, but different colors for these pumpkins. A lot of what I was finding had maybe 4 different fabrics or less, but not the same fabric in a collection with the same print in 5 different colorways. One that did catch my eye that I think could be really pretty was this Pumpkin Spice Gatherings line by Primitive Gatherings. This line came out earlier this year, so it should still be pretty easy to find, I would think, although I did not look that up to double check that information. But if you search Pumpkin Spice Gatherings or stopping your local quilt shop, there's probably a pretty good chance you're going to be able to find it. So I'm just gonna put this out here. This is available online. I will link to this information, but what it is it is from the Moda catalog, and it gives all of the fabric SKUs within the fabric line. So this is what the colors look like. It's really pretty, and it has all of the fall colors, which I love. You can see them really nicely here in this photograph. And I just love that it's the full rainbow of fall. And then these last few pages here show some of the projects that could be made with this collection. Now, this is the part here that I was most interested in. In this document, and again, I will have this linked, you can see all of the prints, and you can also see the different colors that the different prints are available in. So right away, I was noticing this right here. So this is print 49296. The second two numbers tell you what color it is. So you see right here, we have 4926 in the color 20. This is color 21. We have it in color 13 right here. This is a similar print, but not exactly the same. So this is 49293. So not exactly the same print, but you can see it is similar to what we have here. And then down here, we have 4926 in the color 16, in the color 17. Is that the last one? That might be the last one. But then we also have this 4923 popping up here again in the color 22. I know I saw it another spot here for in the color 21. So you've got a couple different options here of same prints, different colors. So this might be one line that you check out and see what you think. The other thing I wanted to mention too, because this is what I would do if I was having trouble finding same print, different colors in the same line, or even same print, different colors, different lines, because sometimes that happens, would be to consider either using a basic, you know, like basic grays, grunge fabrics would be a wonderful choice, or Robin Pickens thatched fabrics, another wonderful choice. Vanessa Gertzen has a little polka dot print, that's a basic. Those basics come in lots of different colors. They're always available and they are easy to find. So that would be something that I would consider, maybe just going with a little bit more of a basic fabric. Alternatively, go with different prints. You could choose the colors that you liked best, but then choose slightly different prints. You know, I was mentioning the 4926 and the 4923s look pretty similar, but they're a little bit different. So maybe something like that gives you just a little bit of difference, but not, you know, we're not doing acorn fabric versus floral fabric versus stripes. We have something a little bit more cohesive, but just a little bit different. So those would be two other ways of approaching it if you can't find exactly what you're looking for with the 5 matching prints, 5 different colors. So those would be my suggestions. But check out this fabric line. I do think this would be really pretty. Lisa Bonjean's scale on her prints is so nice for piecing with. It's all small scale for the most part. Really fun to piece with. And this one especially was super pretty because it is just that whole rainbow of fall colors, which I think would be beautiful in the Roadside Harvest pattern. That is my last question for today. My tummy has been grumbling here for a little bit, so it is time for me to go upstairs and cook up a little supper for my family. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those for me in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer. I think that's it. Thanks so much for stopping by. I will catch you again next time.